Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Black Country and Marches Institute of Technology. It's great to see so many people here today and quite a few familiar faces in the audience. It's an absolute pleasure to host this Very Light Rail conference today. Our IoT is one of 19 now in the country, and we're here to equip people with the technical skills to secure well-paid careers. And we're working really closely with Nick Mallinson and the team at BCIMO to ensure that we have people that have the right technical skills for these new technologies and to support the important development of the VLR. With further ado, I just want to cover some housekeeping and then we'll move on to the video to introduce the conference today. So we're not expecting a fire alarm. If the fire alarm goes off, if it goes from intermittent to continual, then could I ask you to quickly vacate the room here, through the doors at the rear of the building, out through the main reception area, onto the car park where most of you are probably parked today. That's our assembly point. So just make your way out as quickly as possible, and there will be fire marshals present to help. We have first aiders on site, so if anyone should need first aid today, just report into reception and they will support you. And toilets can be found on every single level of the building, and you're more than welcome to wander around today if you get a chance, but I'm assuming Nick's got a very action-packed agenda for you, so you may not have time for that. So enjoy the conference. That's all from me, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow, what a cool video. Yeah, and what a journey the UK rail industry's been on over the last couple of centuries, and a lot of that took place here in the Black Country. I'm Colin Crane, I'm the Chief Executive of the Black Country Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your facilitator today. Welcome to Dudley, and welcome to the Black Country. This is an incredible area for those of you who know it in the room, and it probably has a lot in common with areas like you, just jam-packed full of brilliant businesses. Around about 35,000 businesses based in the Black Country. Over 1 million people live here. And for 200-300 years, industry's been based here. And we have those problems that all of you will face wherever you are, around congestion, around getting our people to and from work, around getting our products to market, which is why events like today with products like this are just so exciting. Now, the conference and the imminent opening of the Very Light Rail National Innovation Centre marks the start of the next exciting stage of this journey. The centre is going to be absolutely phenomenal and will be a testament to all the hard work that the various partners have put into this. And I, for one, I'm really excited about it. Now, first of all, I'd like to offer you a really warm welcome to this brilliant building, the innovation of technology. Now, many thanks to our physical hosts, the Black Country and Marches Institute of Technology, and thanks Georgina, who have been incredibly accommodating to get us here. And my God, have we had a hassle over the last few years. I think this is the third or fourth iteration of this. We went through COVID and cancellations. But just looking at today, originally, when this conference was set up in this building, we were looking at a small room just out there to fit everyone in. And then we've moved that actually to the atrium outside. And then when we realised how many people were signing up today, into this main room. So around about 160 in the room today, and about the same online as well. So if you are online, it's great to see you. And make sure you keep engaged. I know probably most of you are at home sitting in your pants and eating toast at the moment. Most of the people in the audience are doing the same thing, so don't you worry about that. Now, we've got a really jam-packed day today. The big exciting part's the tour as well over lunchtime. But I'll give you a brief summary of what goes on today. It's slightly different, I think, to what's on your agendas in front of you. Now, this morning, we have two main sessions. The case for VLR and its applications and current projects, and then a short break followed by technology developments today and future developments. At 12:30, we'll have a break for lunch, and there'll be tours and breakout sessions for guests attending in person. Our virtual guests will then join us again at 2:50 for session 3, which will look at the future of VLR. I'll explain how all the sessions will work later on. At the end of each session, we'll invite all the speakers who have spoke in that session so far back to the stage, and you'll have a chance to ask questions at stage. If you can refrain from raising your hand or asking any questions during the talks, we'll do all that at the end to keep the agenda on target. Now, if you're at home, you can email questions to vlrquestions@bcimo.co.uk. The event will finish at 4 o'clock, and you can hang around, have a cup and have a chat about people, get really excited about the things you've learned about today, or you can get home really quick as you can. Now, with no further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our first keynote speakers day, which is an address from Andy Street, Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Hi there, Andy Street, Mayor of the West Midlands here, and an honour to be able to say a few words at your conference today. So, VLR, and indeed the VLR Innovation Centre, two incredible pieces of innovation here in the West Midlands. So VLR first of all, and of course Coventry is our candidate city for VLR. Idea very simple, that middle-sized cities that perhaps don't have the density of public transport use will be able to have this new technology, which of course is less expensive to implement and indeed less disruptive. So it makes it viable. Brilliant that we're now at the point of prototyping in the Coventry scheme, and of course in the latest award from government to the region for money that we call City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. Very catchy, isn't it? No. But in that is the money for the first test rail route in Coventry from the station. So really exciting that that's happening. What's equally exciting is that we have, of course, the Innovation Centre, which has come out of the ground in Dudley. Lovely that it's alongside the metro extension into Dudley. Lovely that it's part of that town centre regeneration in Dudley. But what it is doing is saying, how are we going to come to own the intellectual property around this? Can we even turn it into a business in its own right, so that those benefits that VLR are bringing around congestion, around pollution, and of course around cost effectiveness, so that they can be shared with more places. So all in all, it's something that I'm a huge believer in, and I'm really pleased with the progress we're making in a number of ways. And I trust you'll enjoy debating it, dissecting it today.
Very much. Now, it's a shame Andy couldn't be here in person, but it's great to hear his support for VLR. Andy spent a lot of time of his time as mayor championing local transport projects, which has been a real boost for the region. Now, unfortunately, our second planned keynote speaker, Councillor Jim O'Ball from Coventry City Council, was unable to meet today as well. So we'll move straight on to Dr. Nick Mallinson, who many of you will know. He's the Chief Executive of BCIMO, and he'll talk about the case for Very Light Rail. Now, Nick's been involved in VLR literally since about 2014, and his unwavering passion has been instrumental in getting VLR and the National Innovation Centre to where it is today. So I'd like to introduce Nick.
Thank you, Corinne. Welcome, everybody. Perhaps I should just explain that the Black Country Innovative Manufacturing Organisation is the legal entity behind the Very Light Rail National Innovation Centre. So we're a research technology organisation, not for profit, and we're set up to collaborate with industry to deliver very light rail solutions. So I'm going to talk this morning in the next 20 minutes about the case for very light rail. So this won't be technical, there's a lot of that coming later, but this is the sort of question you have to answer when you talk to the Department for Transport. You have to make a case out. So, as we saw in the opening video, rail has played a very important part in the development of the UK and the connecting of various parts of the UK. So the Swansea to Mumbles Railway being the first fee-paying passenger railway in 1807. You saw in the video how the railways really expanded in the 19th century, but the emergence of alternative transport solutions, the car, saw them decline in the 20th century, especially after the Second World War, and there then became the interest in building motorways. And there were lots of things done during the 1950s and 60s to try and make the railways more affordable. So the modernisation plan that British Railways ran, the beaching cuts, privatisation, formation of Network Rail, but the decline carried on until around about 2008. And that's when climate change started to raise its head and politicians started to understand that perhaps transport needed to be reformed in some way. Electric buses being the current favourite, I will add. So, I'm going to look at the case for VLR from a number of different angles. And if we start with political, environmental and legal drivers, and I apologise, it says environmental, not that's my fault. Okay. Since 2019, there have been a number of initiatives, changes of policy, legislation. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but you can see on the slides, Clean Air Strategy, call for evidence of how light rail could make a change to transport in 2019, Future Mobility, Urban Strategy, and then the Future of Transport Programme, all of those in 2019. And then more recently, the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, heavily focused on hydrogen for rail. The Williams-Shapps report last year to recreate, in essence, British Railways, but in a better form. And now we've got the Future of Transport, the Rural Strategy this year. So lots of things going on. From my perspective is, does this make any difference to how rail is designed, delivered and operated? That's the big question. So if we look at the sociological drivers that make a case for very light rail, we do need socially improved public transport. If we stick with what we've got at the moment of everybody driving, very often one person in a car, we're going to need more roads, there's going to be more pollution, and basically people are not using their time very effectively. So many communities in the rural areas remain isolated actually, following the beaching cuts. There may have been occasional bus services provided, but they generally get phased out quickly. And actually it has an effect on health. Research shows cardiovascular problems, mental health, and increased mortality in rural areas. And of course in urban environments we've got heavy congestion. And it's interesting that on average a driver for every mile loses 27 seconds of useful time. So over a year that amounts to 31 hours through the congestion. You may feel it's more. I travel on the M6 and the M5 from Rugby to Dudley every day, and 20 minutes of that 1 hour, 10-minute journey I'm stationary. Now stress is a big thing, and it produces heart disease, hypertension, high blood pressure, as well as many other physical disorders. And of course you've got increased road rage and road traffic incidents. So these are all reasons why we should find a better way of people getting from A to B. And then also it's interesting, the perception of public transport is changing. Sorry, I've not been telling you to move on, have I? When I turn this page here, could you... it's interesting how the perception of public transport's changing. So these two pictures, one on the left has got a railway vehicle, the one on the right has got a modern multi-section bus. And when people were asked which picture they preferred, 55% preferred the rail picture, only 17% preferred the bus picture. I don't know what the rest preferred, it must have been undecided. But rail use has increased since 1986 by 152%, and it now comprises around about 40% of all public transport journeys, even allowing for the COVID blip. Young people are driving far less than they did in the 1990s. In fact, many of them are not actually getting a driving licence. So things are changing in society. Is that clear? Thank you. Now, there are technological drivers. The world is changing at a fantastic rate. And my prediction is that railways will be controlled by an iPhone within the next 5 years. Why do you need a digital signalling system when you can get it from Apple? Many things going on, lightweight structures, multi-material structures, including composites. They're available in the rest of the world. Can we get them into rail to an increasing extent, and in an accelerated way as well? Battery and hydrogen propulsion is with us now. Fast charging, you'll see on the tour today, we've got a 470 kilowatt charger that is going to be used to charge the Coventry vehicle. And it's not come from the rail industry, it's come from the electric bus industry. We've just bought it off the shelf and moved it in. And I've had people from the rail industry saying, we didn't know you could do that. Can you really buy things for rail that aren't made in a railway factory? So mindsets need to change. Mobility as a service. People now can look on their phone and order up a journey. So VLR would provide a very useful link between some existing transport solutions, filling a gap basically, very affordably. 5G will now enable real-time monitoring of vehicles from a central control point. And that will help us accelerate the use of automated operation and ultimately autonomous operation. Digital manufacturing and digital solutions will enable us actually to remove traditional parts of railway solutions. And then, of course, autonomy, ultimately, on a railway, should be a sort of a no-brainer in terms of improving safety. Unless the autonomous system switched off dies, then it will always be doing what it should do. So we don't want to see any repeats of trams going round corners too fast and falling over because the driver had fallen asleep. Finally, economic drivers, and this is where the DFT is always interested. Current rail solutions are typically unaffordable. They're commercially unsustainable. There's very few tram systems that actually make a surplus. They're expensive to maintain, and they're expensive to operate because they have drivers who charge a lot and are threatening to go on strike, as you may know. Rail-based permanent ways actually are a very good way of developing the economy. They are permanent, so buildings of new housing, businesses and leisure facilities cluster around those transport links. They don't cluster around bus routes because bus routes can be discontinued in 12 weeks. They are not permanent ways. In rural environments, the improved transport links will help to improve productivity and economic growth. And that's actually now recognised by the Department of Levelling Up, who have visited our site and said this could be a key driver to actually delivering levelling up, not just in the north, but in any part that is a long way away from London. And reduced traffic congestion, that's your road traffic, is estimated if we can get people away from the roads, will save approximately £20 billion a year. So those are the economic, sociological, technical and legislative drivers. So coming on to VLR as being a solution, very light rail, or VLR as we now abbreviate it. We actually had a question yesterday come into us saying, what is very light rail? How's it different from light rail or heavy rail? So this is pretty simple. Heavy rail is heavy. So a rail car, diesel multiple unit, one car will weigh about 40 tonnes without any passengers in it. Light rail is actually not much lighter than heavy rail, it just carries fewer passengers. So light means a smaller number of passengers, not a lower weight vehicle. Very light rail is what it says on the tin. And the definition we use is the vehicle weighs no more than 1 tonne per linear metre. So the Coventry vehicle that you'll look at today is 11 metres long and it weighs about 11 tonnes. The lower weight means you can have less robust infrastructure to run it on, and that's a key area of driving cost out of railways, not over-engineering the permanent way. I'm going to stop there. If you don't understand very light rail now, then we'll have to have another conference. So very light rail is a low-cost approach. We could call ourselves low-cost railways, but we've chosen to use VLR as the way that we demonstrate the benefit. It can supplement existing railways, it can supersede less efficient modes, and it can support the delivery of end-to-end journeys. So that might mean we have autonomous pods at one end and we use HS2 occasionally at the other end, but it's part of a connected public transport solution. Next slide, please. Oh, you beat me. Now, right from the start, we've said very light rail isn't just about the vehicle, it's about reducing the civil and infrastructure costs, it's about eliminating traditional signalling, so going totally digital on where the vehicles are, where other vehicles are, when they can move, when they can't move, and communication back to central control. And importantly, it's it's about the passenger experience. Because you want to encourage modal shift from cars. So it's no good saying, here you are, new mode, take it or leave it. It's got to be compelling. And all of this is on a foundation of digital technologies, which are widely available from other sectors. And really what we're saying with Very Light Rail is transfer technology from a sector where it's been developed and proven and cost has been driven out of it and bring it into rail. It's uncomfortable for traditional rail, but that is the way the world works these days. It's called R&D, that's rob and duplicate. You take it from somebody else. Next slide, please. So VLR delivers a variety of benefits, but here we just put a few. I'm not going to go into the table comparing heavy rail with light rail, etc., but just going down the bullets at the left-hand side. We can get low or zero emissions using automotive technology now. We can build the systems, certainly the Coventry system will demonstrate this, we can build them, operate and maintain them at lower cost. Fewer disruptions while we're building. If anybody's been to Birmingham in the last few years, you'll notice the city centre has been a bit of a mess while they've been extending the light rail system. No overhead lines or concrete guideways because the vehicles will be self-powered. Safety engineering appropriate to the use case. So we're not going to use mainline high-speed rail regulations to control very light rail. We've got a journey to go there with the Office for Rail and Road, but let's have things that are appropriate to the need. It will enable urban and rural connectivity at lower cost. And this is where I refer to the twigs of the transport network, not the main line or the branches. It's user-centred design, so the passenger, the people that pays for the service, is fundamental here. If they don't like it and don't come and use it, it won't succeed. Based on digital DNA, as I mentioned earlier, and it's going to use autonomy. Next slide. Nearly finished now. So where will VLR be used, or where could it be used? Well, there's two main areas. One is to help the existing rail network, perhaps on branch lines, and there's two clear areas there. One is to help reopen certain closed lines. They may not have been closed by beaching, they may have been closed for other reasons. But this would be a low-cost way of reopening those lines. Or new branch lines. Putting a new branch line in is very expensive, and Robin Butler, when he speaks, will be able to give some idea of when you're developing a new area of land and DFT is trying to encourage rail travel, the costs of putting that connection in are incredible. And the other area is urban, or trams as we call them. So existing towns and cities cannot, generally, if they're medium-sized like Coventry, they cannot afford a light rail system. They can't make the business case to Treasury for it. VLR will make that possible. We've got new developments, new eco-towns, where VLR would be a natural shoe-in when the town is being planned. And then there's the opportunities for lightweight freight. And we've got Mole Solutions here today who are trying to pursue, in effect, very light rail solutions for underground freight delivery. Next slide. Nearly finished. So we come on to journeys and the concept of hub to home, and we're going to show in a moment another video which I hope shows what the world might look like in a few years' time, where different modes of travel link together. And everybody, in effect, takes a personalised public transport journey, obviously using their iPhone, or other phones are available, I should say. So this is essentially based on the analogy that the main railway lines are the trunk of a tree, you've then got the branch lines, then you may get the twigs going out into different areas, and finally the leaves are the final journey. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you very much for your time.
Imagine the UK's transport network as a tree, where the trunk represents the mainline railway, the branches represent branch lines connecting regional and rural areas, the twigs represent roads within urban towns and cities, and the leaves, the roads within the suburbs of a town or city. Now imagine being able to take an integrated, seamless and personalised journey from a central hub direct to your front door, all using public transport, offering the very latest in digital and manufacturing technologies. And supported by an easy-to-use mobile phone app. The journey begins via traditional heavy rail. On arrival at the station, make a quick change onto a branch line specific very light rail vehicle. The Revolution VLR vehicle shown here is an exemplar of rural VLR. Rural VLR can be deployed on new or disused branch lines, many of which were closed under the 1960s beaching review. Self-propulsion removes the need for expensive overhead electrification, enabling the better connection of rural communities currently reliant on their cars as a means of transport. Constant Wi-Fi access means you can watch movies, make calls and listen to music without interruption, even through tunnels. Hop off the Branchline VLR, and thanks to a turn-up-and-go service combined with the intelligent monitoring of passenger numbers and real-time updates, it's straight onto a ticketless urban VLR tram. The Coventry VLR system shown here is an exemplar of urban VLR. With level 4 autonomy, urban VLR systems will be monitored via remote control, with the operator taking control if necessary from a remote location. Fully battery-powered urban VLR systems produce zero emissions and can be charged in just 3 minutes, negating the need for unsightly overhead cables. Ultimately, urban VLR systems will increase public transport use in towns and cities, reducing the number of cars on the road. Vehicle-to-vehicle comms ensure there is no waiting at the next change, meaning that the next mode of transport arrives exactly on time. An on-demand, solar-powered and battery-operated autonomous pod is ideal for the last mile of the hub-to-home journey. The Westfield pod shown here is an exemplar of autonomous pod technology. Your mobile phone will automatically pair with the pod's infotainment system, so you can continue whatever you're doing uninterrupted. The pod will drop you at your front door, relaxed and happy after a stress-free hub-to-home journey.
Brilliant, and thank you, Nick, for a really interesting presentation. Just to emphasise, if any members of the RMT in the room, we're not suggesting replacing staff with iPhones or that the train drivers get paid too much either. So on the area of political balance there. Now, remember, for those of you at home, please send in your questions to vlrquestions@bcimo.co.uk. Now, next I'm going to invite Colin Knight, Director of Transportation and Highways for Coventry City Council, and Nicholas Small, Senior Rail Programme Manager, up to stage to ask a few questions. Hiya, Colin, just to start off, do you want to say a few words about yourself and your job, if that's okay?
Yes, thanks, Corin. So my name's Colin Knight and I'm Director of Transport and Highways at the City Council. Got particular responsibility for looking at future cities and innovative transport.
And brilliant. And Nicola, do you want to introduce?
So I'm Nicola Small. I'm Coventry City Council's Very Light Rail Programme Manager. Come with about 20 years experience in the transport sector, but I'm really excited to be leading the Very Light Rail Programme for the city.
Brilliant, thank you. Colin, we'll start with you if that's okay. This is an unusual project for a council to be leading on. Why is Coventry doing this?
Well, that's a really interesting question because, You know, it's certainly been a huge challenge for us, actually, as a local authority. It's not something I'd really contemplated till we started, but, you know, actually leading an R&D project from local government has proven to be a complete challenge. Now, I suppose our journey really began probably back about 6 or 7 years ago. We were looking at how can we take advantage of, you know, the benefits that HS2 is going to bring to the region. So we were looking at HS2 connectivity to Coventry, you know, which is, you know, HS2 interchange, not that far from our boundary, to be honest. You know, we were looking at the various options, and our members challenged us and said, well, you know, yes, we could look at a bus-based solution, but we want, you know, we want to do something a bit better than that. What could we look at? And that kind of took me back to the 1980s, to be honest, when I worked for West Midlands PTE, forerunner of now Centro and the CA. And, you know, I was working on the parliamentary powers for the Black Country routes for the Midland Metro. And then it was obvious that there was a problem in terms of cost. And Nick's already mentioned, you know, the cost factor. But it was absolutely obvious that there was going to be a huge problem in terms of landing the funding, making positive business cases, particularly in the smaller to medium-sized cities like Coventry or less densely populated areas. So, you know, started to think about, well, how can we deliver something that's affordable? You know, if you look at the continuum, you know, you've got various bus-based systems go up to roughly 10 million a kilometre, but then you've got a gap until it starts again in the 30s to 40s million pound per kilometre, you know, for conventional sort of tram systems. So, you know, there was clearly a space there that we needed to aim at. So, bearing in mind the work that Nick and his colleagues at Warwick Manufacturing Group are doing, looking at applying lightweighting, it became, you know, we asked Nick the question, could you apply this to a street tram car? And then as a civil engineer, I was asking the question, well, if we have a lightweight tram car, can we then do a lighter weight track which doesn't sit so deep in the highway, doesn't disrupt the utilities but anywhere near as much, reduces disruption to the public, and therefore reduces cost. So in the simple terms, that's where the project began. Nick said yes, and that's where the journey began. We began to bid for funding, and we started to, you know, and the story developed. And it's clear in a city like Coventry, like any other part of the country, you know, we've got huge challenges, air quality, the challenge of decarbonisation. How do we enable development? You know, Coventry's growing at a phenomenal rate, 21% over the last 10 years. You know, we've already had to allocate 2 large chunks of Greenbelt, but how do we support growing densities of population? How do we make our cities more livable? So, you know, we felt that a light rail system as part of an integrated network, and, you know, we need to stress this point, this is not about competing with other modes, this is about complementing and creating a seamless integrated network. So I could go on for hours, but, you know, that's some of the initial reasons why we embarked on this journey.
And solving those problems must have made it easy to get political backing from the council as well, I guess.
And that's what's been brilliant. Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that we've been really fortunate in is that, you know, we've had the backing of our politicians, you know, which is incredible because it is, you know, a risk for them, a risk reputationally. But also because we have got such great innovators in the region. You know, you, Corinne, have already referenced, you know, the great businesses around here. And of course, the same's true across, you know, the rest of the West Midlands. You know, we've got, people don't know, I don't think, about the fantastic innovation that this region's capable of.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And Nicola, we've already said that we're not trying to compete with other modes of transport, but what advantages does Coventry VLR have against, say an electric bus?
Well, that is an interesting question, and we do get asked that a lot. You know, why don't you just use an electric bus to solve this problem of filling the gap for transport connectivity? And buses are a great mode of transport, and they do serve areas that a very light rail system couldn't serve. So they are an integral part of the transport solution. And in fact, Coventry will be the first all-electric bus city by 2025, and we're really excited about that prospect. But as Colin has said, it's all about having a really well-connected, integrated transport structure. And to have that structure, you need a strong backbone. And what we see Very Light Rail is offering is that strong backbone. Every high-performing city, every ambitious city that wants to be a livable city, a future city, needs that strong backbone. And that's where we're coming from with the very light rail system. So what that offers, having that permanent infrastructure, it's already been mentioned, but it gives rise to that economic investment around the mobility hubs that will serve, that will enable people to use the very light rail service. We'll see investment in shops and facilities, restaurants. It will become a place where people can easily get connected to their city for leisure, for visiting family. It's really important that we enable connectivity and that we access, we offer that connectivity to areas of the city that are currently poorly served. And by having that permanent infrastructure, that gives people confidence that this transport network is there to stay. Because when it comes to a bus can be decommissioned within a 12-week period. And people don't have that same level of confidence in using a service if they can see the tracks in the ground, they know where it goes, they know it's there for a long-term period, gives them confidence to use it. And last but certainly not least, the fact that it is tracks in the ground, you've only got the longitudinal movements. So in terms of bringing forward autonomy, which would enable a lower cost operational cost, we're in a much better position with a rail-based system to bring forward autonomy. And we hope to work with DFT to make that a very real possibility in the near future.
Brilliant. And if you're laying tracks anyway, Colin, I mean, why not go for the traditional tram method if you're going to do that work anyway?
Well, I mean, it's cost. It's all down to cost. So, we are targeting a cost of track of £10 million a kilometre, which compared to, as I say, conventional tram systems, they start at anywhere in the 30s to 40s, and in city centres can be over 100. I'm sure people in the audience will be well aware of the length of time Broad Street's been closed in the centre of Birmingham, because of all the various utility diversions, structure strengthening that's got to be done. So, and you'll hear a lot more detail about this from the experts later, but essentially we've created, a track that will sit within the top 300 mil of the carriageway. The first utilities should, and I say should, be a minimum of 450 mil down into the road. So in theory, we should not interfere or clash with any utilities. I mean, clearly there's a bit more of a nuanced answer to that one, but that's the principle. So this is a unique track form. It comprises one type of slab. One type of slab will fit all situations in terms of curvature, track layout. So because these units can be cut, as you'll hear later, they could, the fixings are very flexible, the way they can be used. Again, it's a very adaptable, efficient system to lay. So I think those are some of the primary reasons why, it was so important. As I say, from a civil engineering background, the key has always been, if you want to drive down cost, then you've got to look at the civil engineering, and it's down to the track. So that was really the key element.
And a question for both, I guess. I mean, you mentioned this. We know that utilities are a big issue for tram projects, don't we? And you can just look at Birmingham City Centre, Nottingham had problems, and we've got our own tram being built in the corner here. How a bit more detail here. How does that actually VLR sort of help address, though, the high costs and the timing that the utilities can handle? I mean, Nicola, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, you will hear more about the track project later,
Yeah.
and it is the linchpin of the project. I mean, the vehicle's great, it looks great, and you will see that today, but to innovate in the track form is the real challenge for the project. And you will hear from Chris Micallef, the lead engineer at WMG, on how, and together with Ingerot, they've been a fantastic team. And what they've come up with, it is a really robust track system that we're about to carry out the testing in the coming months and couple of years ahead. But what we've got and what we've seen so far in terms of its laboratory performance is phenomenal. So it's really shallow, it's easy in theory to put in the ground and remove from the ground, and we've been working with stats companies as we've gone through this process. We've got a stats coordinator here in the front row, Wayne, who has been, you'll again hear from later, who's been taking the utilities companies on this journey with us. So we're not working in silo here, we have been keeping our stats companies briefed on what the project is, and what we've heard back from them is that they like this project because what it means for them is that they don't have to divert all of their network, which is a major issue for utilities companies. It's a major project in itself to change all those network plans. So we've also got Andrew with us as well from Cadent, and you'll hear from them both later today.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you very much for that. And Colin, so we've heard some figures today of anywhere up to, 40 to 60 million pounds per kilometre for traditional systems, and anywhere between 6 and 9 million for this. That's a huge saving. How do you, beyond the utilities, how do you get that saving per kilometre? That seems extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, time's money. So, utility diversions, the disruption to businesses, that's a key element of it. When you look at the amount of concrete that goes into, much conventional track, half a metre plus down into the ground, we're looking at a much shallower track form, so we're doing much less excavation, much less disruption. But there are other innovations too which are worth referencing. So one of our challenges to Nick and the team was we want a vehicle that can take 15-metre radii curves. And the reason we wanted that was so that we can easily retrofit it into existing urban environments. So that will reduce land take, and that will mean we can stay much more within the highway boundary. So again, that's another way that we can reduce costs. As I mentioned, the fact that you need a single type of slab unit and the fact that it can be manufactured remotely, again, we're aiming at, standard production. The vehicles themselves, the prediction is these will become considerably cheaper once they get into, bigger volume production than a conventional tram vehicle. And that's taken into account capacity as well, because obviously we're looking at a smaller vehicle. But, again, the vehicle's been designed, with cost in mind. No overhead wiring. That's a biggie. I know, again, from my time on Midland Metro, the anxiety from Network Rail, for example, about stray currents, the impact on their signalling systems, and the measures necessary to protect them. Well, by having, a battery-powered system, no external wiring, again, we can avoid many of those problems. And of course, there's also the aesthetic benefits as well. But, there's just some of the ways in which we'll be able to, significantly reduce costs.
Brilliant, thank you. And Nicola, it's always very exciting. What's the interest been like in this project?
Well, it's been phenomenal. I think you can see by the size of the audience today, and those online as well, that the interest in VLR as a technology is far and wide. But a particular interest in Coventry VLR and what we're doing locally for our city and how that can be applicable to other cities nationwide. We've had interest from across the country, and some of the representatives from those organisations are here today. So we've had Peterborough, Cambridgeshire, West of England, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, we've got Oxfordshire, Derby, Stoke. Stoke is already progressing a feasibility study. So it's really exciting to work with other councils, because you can see that we're not trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. There is a problem that needs a solution, and we want to be part of that solution. And Coventry, as a city to work for, to see, from my perspective as a transport planner, I wanted to work on something that was innovative, that was game-changing, that, something that would really change the way that we operate as a country and the way that we encourage people to use public transport. And for me, this is it. There's nothing else out there that will achieve the magnitude of modal shift required to achieve net zero. If you look at urban transport schemes, rail-based systems do it. They achieve modal shift. You've got 30% modal shift in Nottingham. You just can't get anywhere near that with any other modes. And we need that. We're at a point in history where we'll all be breathing in poor air if we don't make a massive change to our transport network, and that's my passion, and that's why I spend long hours on this project.
Well, brilliant, thank you both very, very much for this. Just to finish, not that we're being West Midlands competitive here, but what's the timeline for this? Because there's lots of councils interested, and we want to do this first, don't we? So, what's the timeline in Coventry at the moment?
Well, the big thing we want to achieve, first of all, is to get the city centre demonstrator in.
Yeah.
So, what we need to do is to show we've got the track form, which you'll be able to see at lunchtime. Some of the units will be available. The vehicles there in the workshop. We need to bring the two elements together in a real live environment. and show people how manifestly this works. We need to prove that it's easy to install. We need to work with the utilities on that installation, and proof of concept, and we're aiming to do that in Coventry City Centre by 2024. The first route, which would be out towards University Hospital in the northeast of the city, we're looking to get that up and running 26, 27. That's the kind of timescale that we're looking at.
Brilliant. Look, both of you, thank you very, very much. I can see your passion and interest in this, and I think it's something everyone in the room is getting very excited about. So thank you very much. Please. Brilliant. Thank you both. Okay, next up we have Tim Burley, who is Head of External Relations at Evershot Rail, and Darren Smith, who's Head of Transport Design International. And they're going to talk about the Revolution VLR, which is suitable for rural and mainline feeder applications. Tim and Darren, welcome to the stage.
Thanks very much indeed, Corinne, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to anyone who may have attended presentations on this exciting project previously. As you'll see in here, we've made a significant amount of progress, and we're already taking the next steps towards introducing Revolution Very Light Rail, RVLR hereafter, into passenger service. Our presentation's in two parts, with the first focusing on the vehicle itself and the second outlining our plans for the future. We thought it might be helpful just to start with an overview of the design philosophy behind Revolution and explain how this will deliver a reliable, high-quality passenger experience that's combined with the lowest possible costs of system implementation and operation. Sustainability in its widest sense has been at the heart of the RVLR programme since its inception. To create a compelling proposition that will encourage the much-needed modal shift from road to rail, any very light rail hold system solution must be both technically and economically sustainable, as Nick has outlined. The need for economic sustainability is a key theme both of the Williams-Shapps Plan for Rail and the Department for Transport's Transport Decarbonisation Plan. We were delighted to see within the latter a clear government commitment to drive decarbonisation and local transport improvements by making quantifiable carbon reductions a fundamental part of local transport planning and funding. We firmly believe that RVLR has a significant role to play in delivering these goals. Just to remind you quickly of its genesis, the RVLR programme was born out of a challenge set by RSSB on behalf of the Department for Transport to provide an attractive but low-cost rail vehicle solution that was principally, but not exclusively, intended for rural applications. We'd like to thank the RSSB team for their wholehearted support and encouragement and advice throughout the project, especially in encouraging us to question the relevance of some hitherto accepted rail industry norms where these would have posed unrealistic constraints on achieving our aspirations. We've also received already excellent input from the team at the Office of Rail and Road, whose early involvement will assist us all greatly as we move towards series production. Two principal system-level considerations have influenced our design decisions on RVLR. Lightweighting is absolutely fundamental to minimising costs of operation and thus maximising economic sustainability. The lighter the vehicle is, the less energy it requires to propel it, whatever the energy source may be, and the less wear it causes to the track and infrastructure on which it runs. In addition, when line reconstruction and/or extension is being contemplated, a very light rail solution will be able to operate on lightweight modular slab track that can be laid, as Colin's summarised very well, more rapidly, less intrusively, and most importantly, at significantly lower cost than traditional heavy rail infrastructure. All these good things said, the design has to be balanced. Low overall vehicle mass mustn't be achieved at the expense of robustness and reliability, We'll only persuade car users to get out of their generally reliable and dependable cars and use public transport if the rail service alternative is equally or even more reliable and dependable. Many of the routes on which RVLR is likely to operate won't have received much or any attention, sometimes for several years or even decades. And the vehicle design must therefore accommodate and tolerate this. The laudable quest for vehicle lightness must also be traded against affordability and supportability. Our approach has therefore been to achieve a pragmatic balance between innovation on the one hand and the use of appropriate proven railway systems on the other. By adopting this approach, we've succeeded in our aim of delivering a significant mass reduction. In its demonstrator configuration, RVLR has an unladen mass of just 24.8 tonnes, compared, as Nick outlined, with around 41 tonnes for a single-car, self-powered heavy rail vehicle of similar passenger capacity, such as a Class 153. That represents a mass saving of nearly 40%. Modularity, both at major system and at subsystem level, is another key feature of the RVLR design. This delivers benefits throughout the product life cycle. In the design and build phases, it simplifies the assembly and integration process, and it facilitates the cost-effective development of variants. In service operations, it ensures that RVLR vehicles can readily be maintained and supported without the need for costly bespoke facilities, special tools and test equipment. And over the vehicle life, the modularity also assists introduction of enhanced systems as part of the pre-planned technology insertion programs that we all know are essential to maintain the vehicle's longer-term attractiveness to stakeholders. And that clearly is something that's of particular interest to us as Eversholt Rail, as owners and through-life asset managers. We'll now cover in a bit more detail some key aspects of the RVLR design. The most visible, but by no means the only innovative feature of RVLR is its body shell. While it has a welded steel chassis, the remainder of the structure uses lightweight materials. The side panels are made of pre-wired composite. There's 5 of them each side. They're secured primarily by adhesive bonding, complemented by high-strength structural rivets that also assist in locating the panels during build. The cabs and roof are constructed from a combination of aluminium backplates and reinforced composite cladding. The side panels' inner surfaces are pre-finished, and they form the interior of the passenger compartment with no additional panels required. This helps to keep the vehicle as light as possible. It also makes it very straightforward to assemble. It maximises interior space and facilitates cleaning, a much more significant issue now than pre-COVID. Each side panel is interchangeable and individually replaceable in service should the need arise. The modular structure also facilitates the rapid and cost-effective development of variants, for example, an express logistics version, a concept design for which you can see in the lower left of the slide. The use of biodegradable resins within the composite elements assists in maximising whole life sustainability, while from a more holistic sustainability perspective, it's worth noting that at least 70% of the vehicle components for the demonstrator, both by number and by monetary value, have been sourced from the UK supply chain, reducing the net carbon impact of build. We also anticipate a further slight increase in UK content for series production vehicles. We're extremely proud that these attributes, among a whole list of other factors, led to RVLR winning the Aerospace, Automotive and Rail category in the very prestigious Made in the Midlands Awards last month. It was back in February 2018 that the UK government announced its aspiration to eliminate all diesel-only operations on the UK rail network by 2040. Since then, the focus on rail decarbonisation has increased further, and the role that VLR solutions can play in delivering this has been explicitly recognised by Network Rail in their excellent traction decarbonisation network strategy. Thankfully, the RVLR design team was well ahead of the game. They'd already specified hybrid propulsion. The demonstrator has 2 power packs and 2 lithium titanate oxide battery packs. Each power pack comprises a 2.8 litre turbocharged Cummins common rail diesel engine that in its road versions is compliant with Euro 6 emission standards, and that's a first for a rail application. Generator and associated cooling group. Power pack control system ensures that the engine operates at maximum efficiency, minimising both emissions and fuel consumption. It also provides regenerative braking that assists in recharging the batteries. RVLR achieves zero emissions operations and low noise running in stations and built-up areas and at speeds up to 20 miles an hour. In the demonstrator configuration, the vehicle is capable of speeds up to 65 miles an hour. It's straightforward to adapt the power pack and battery mix to suit specific operations. Battery-only variants combined with recharging facilities either along the route or at termini or at both are likely to be the optimal solution for applications with a modest operating range and or relatively low line speed. Maintenance on the power pack and battery packs is straightforward. Removal for major maintenance interventions is achieved in less than 20 minutes, with complete replacement in less than an hour, requiring only manually operated pallet jacks as seen in the lower photo. We selected bogie suspension for RVLR to provide the balance of good ride quality and vehicle stability that passengers rightly expect. The bogies are a derivative of an existing Wabtec product developed initially for freight applications, so their robustness in the UK rail environment is well proven. We've implemented targeted mass reduction measures, such as the use of hollow axle Lucchini wheel sets and smaller diameter wheels, 720 rather than 850mm diameter, saving approximately 1.5 tonnes overall. The use of carbon fibre prop shafts contributes a further 20 kilos per vehicle, with their shock absorption characteristics avoiding the need for additional protection devices for the traction motors. RVLR's electric braking system means there are no hydraulic or pneumatic systems, again reducing mass, cost and maintenance workload. Creating a high-quality passenger environment that will attract modal shift from road transport has been a key consideration for the team. As you'd expect, it's been designed from the outset as a fully accessible vehicle, compliant with PRM TSI requirements and including a wheelchair space. It includes all the features that are normal in modern heavy rail vehicles and also buses and coaches, such as full air conditioning, LED lighting and naturally connectivity, as mentioned earlier by Nick. The vehicle's Ethernet backbone facilitates Wi-Fi provision, and there are USB charging sockets for personal mobile devices at each row of seats, so no excuses for phone charge anxieties. The internal construction with its floor and body side mounting rails makes it straightforward to tailor the interior layout to specific operator and stakeholder needs. For example, a different mix of bay to airline seating, luggage stacks and bicycle storage. The vehicle is bi-directional, 2 driving cabs, avoiding the need to provide infrastructure such as turning loops that can add significantly to overall costs and implementation timeframes. We've given a strong focus to providing the excellent field of view essential for safe line of sight operation. Driver's compartment layout draws on the team's experience and operator feedback. Primary functions use conventional controls and push buttons, with a centrally mounted menu-based touchscreen display providing access to secondary controls and settings. The driver also has, as you can see, a suite of displays from the internal and external CCTV cameras. Bringing the demonstrator to Ironbridge last year, seems strange to be saying last year, was the culmination of an extensive programme of analysis, modelling and testing. It included modal, fatigue and linear static finite element analysis of the novel vehicle structure to demonstrate from the earliest stage that it would meet, and in fact it exceeds, the relevant light rail vehicle crash worthiness requirements that we and RSSB had agreed. Vehicle ride and stability analyses under different load and external conditions, and control system modelling and simulation, including hardware-in-the-loop remote testing that at times involved simultaneous working by personnel in the UK, Scandinavia and mainland Europe. Testing and optimisation of the power packs and batteries was a key element of the subsystem validation and was undertaken at WMG's comprehensive labs in Warwick, including assessing battery pack performance at a range of temperature extremes, evaluating charge and discharge rates, and importantly, testing of all the power pack operating modes. All this prior work allowed us to embark with confidence into full vehicle testing and validation. This commenced at what was then the Quinton Rail Technical Centre at Long Marston in August 2021, and it's continuing at Ironbridge, where our focus is on extended running against a representative duty cycle to confirm the vehicle's overall system reliability and resilience. The team has gained unrivaled experience from setting up the RVLR demonstration facility at Ironbridge. We were always determined that we should show the vehicle in a representative line reopening context to which stakeholders could relate. Ironbridge meets that requirement extremely well, and our colleagues at Harworth Development have been very supportive throughout. As a result, we've made excellent progress. What we produced there to support the stakeholder demonstration activities without the benefit of existing platforms and station buildings evidences just how rapidly and cost-effectively a reopening can be implemented if all parties are aligned and committed. Just a few examples on the slide that I don't need to talk through because you can all read. I think just worth noting that adaptation of the marketing suite, which already has toilet facilities, a catering area and comprehensive standing and sitting space, to a rural station layout would be a very straightforward task, and this has been noted by several of our guests. In parallel with all this, the teams developed and implemented the safety management system and appropriate operating protocols, engaging with the relevant safety and standards bodies to ensure their buy-in now and to provide them with early visibility of our plans for transitioning to the production phase. So, who's seen Revolution so far? Between September and December last year, we hosted 6 full weeks of visits, plus specific one-off events and media briefings, involving over 235 guests, representing national, regional and government organisations, train operating companies, sponsors, consortium members and various special interest groups. Well over 30 TDI and Eversholt Rail colleagues have also visited us there. As you'd imagine, all this required rigorous planning and a disciplined approach to ensure that the guests received the best insight both into the vehicle itself and also the wider system aspects. This year so far, we've hosted stakeholder visits in March, April, May, and early this month, and again, that's involved more than 100 further guests. All their feedback, which we're delighted to say has been overwhelmingly positive, has been noted and will be used to inform the next phase of work. Darren will now outline our future plans.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Corinne. Morning, everybody. There are 2 major work streams, and I'll cover them both, each in turn. First, our plans for the continuing use of the demonstrator vehicle. and secondly, how we will achieve the transition to series production. Within the existing stakeholder demonstrations, we've already been using the demonstrator to undertake practical evaluations of key technologies that we expect to fit as part of future builds. We've already completed initial testing of a solution to remove airborne viruses, quite apt, and more recently a rapid battery charging system, and more will follow. This proactive approach will ensure our readiness to offer these options to future customers. Tomorrow, the demonstrated vehicle will leave Ironbridge and return to Long Marston, where it started, where it will form one of the centrepieces of the Rail Live Industry event on the 22nd and the 23rd of June, undertaking a number of demonstration runs each day similar to the programme that we've run down at Ironbridge. After a short further period of Ironbridge running, we will complete maximum speed testing and other work that requires external test facilities, and this work we expect to complete at the Great Central Railway facility in Leicestershire. All this activity will maximise our knowledge of the demonstrator's performance in readiness for anticipated passenger carrying trials in 2023 at a number of different locations, and we are working closely with key stakeholders to bring these to fruition. In parallel with our continuing work on the demonstrator, our pre-series mobilisation work is already underway. Subject to positive market interest and sponsor commitment, our aim is to have Revolution vehicles built and approved for passenger carrying operations in 2024. A key element of this procurement and assembly is up to 3 further vehicles, all of which will undergo the required approvals and certification activities for passenger operation. Programme critical activities, including the specification and key system selection for battery-only versions, have already been launched, and further work streams will commence later this year. To achieve this initial programme, new assembly facilities, exclusive to Revolution, will be created within the Midlands within the next 12 months. As outlined earlier, a key aim for us is to ensure that the capital cost of Revolution, and Nick and everybody else understands this, but especially Colin, will not only be significantly lower than traditional self-powered heavy rail vehicles, but will also be within striking distance of the modern road transportation alternatives with which it will inevitably compete. The commercial position of Revolution is very important. Up until now, most branch line reopening proposals under the Restoring Your Network initiative have had to assume the use of heavy rail vehicles with their attendant high capital and operating costs. If the service is operated with Revolution, the business case that currently exists can be substantially improved. This should make more rural commuter routes commercially viable, therefore improving the wider connectivity across the UK. Our team is working very, very closely and productively with Network Rail's Restoring Your Railway and light rail teams to maximise the possibilities for early Revolution deployment across the UK. Such reopenings are just one part of a wide range of operational environments to which Revolution is also suited. It also creates possibilities to provide seasonal or event services through the ease and speed of its deployment. This is also becoming an increasingly important consideration for private sector developers and new residential and business park sites. We've also seen interest from the leisure industry in North America, along with commuter applications from Eastern Europe, Asia and the Middle East. Through the application of our design philosophy and sourcing approach outlined earlier by Tim, the benefits Revolution brings to a number of areas to the UK is extremely significant. Revolution's design is both sustainable and fully aligned with the UK's need to decarbonise its operations. One further key benefit of Revolution is the ability to deploy a full system solution in circa 2 years, which Tim has highlighted earlier, which is extremely fast against more traditional solutions. It will assist in bringing forward the modal shift from road transport that is essential to meet our net zero legal obligations. As described earlier, we've already achieved a predominantly UK-based supply chain that will bring multiple benefits to the UK manufacturing sectors, the environment and the local economies. I hope this quick overview of our future plans has shown you how we intend to build on the groundbreaking work completed to date, and has also reinforced the all-round benefits that Revolution production and Very Light Rail will deliver. Thank you all for your attention, and I'll now hand back to Corinne and Colin.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tim and Darren. The passion from people in these projects is just fantastic, isn't it? And what a great example that is as well. We had a few questions coming in from people at home. Remember, you can send your questions in at VLRquestions at bcimo.co.uk. All the slides will be available to all attendees, whether online or actually in the room at the end of the session today, so don't worry about that. Okay, next up is Tim Burley, who's Head of External Relations. Sorry, mate, I'm introducing the last slide. I do apologise. Next up is Robin Butler from Urban and Civic. He's a master developer of large-scale strategic sites. Robin, welcome to the stage.
Identity complex now.
Thank you.
So I know very little about railways, other than the joys of sitting on South West trains most days of my working life. I do know, however, about the frustrations of large-scale development and integration with heavy rail. It's been a preoccupation of mine for 40 years and a frustration, and it's true to say it's governed the way that I've pushed my business forward in terms of selecting sites, because it is so difficult trying to predict and integrate with heavy rail, hence the reason of my interest has flourished really over the last 7 or 8 years with this possibility of very light rail. So in 2009 I started a business which builds new communities. So to give you an idea, the slide in front of you is one now which I now know is close to where Nick lives, in Holton in Rugby. That's about 1,000 acres. It's pretty typical size for us, 6,500 units and about 1 million square feet of employment space, and crucially, no rail connection. So our sites typically would contain, and you've got to remember when you look at this slide, for example, this is all new landscaping, all new housing. This is all completely new. And I know that the house building industry gets a bad press, much with justification, but we're trying to create special sort of settlements. We don't build houses. We do a bit of house building, but generally we sell downland to house builders. We do all the infrastructuring, we do all the on-site roads, we build the parks, we build the schools, and crucially we make the connections into the infrastructure externally. And that is one of the major governing factors in where we locate, and I'll talk about that in a bit. We put in children's play areas. There are all sorts of acronyms, which I now know this room would love, for different types of play areas for children, depending on the ages and things. And typically one of our developments might have 15 of these areas for 5,000 to 7,000 units. Schools, now actually this is a Holton Rugby. We built 3 schools last year. This was probably the one we're most proud of. This is our first secondary school, 1,200 children, £40 million, and that opened in September. Community space, again, that's in front of another one of our schools. And largely we integrate with public transport, but nearly all of our public transport integration is with buses. For the reasons that were spoken about earlier, it's flexible, it's easy to put in, connect, and you can do it over relatively short-term periods. So you can see what works and what doesn't work. So the model is, to me, fairly simple. You take a large block of land. You used to be able to buy land outright, freehold. For whatever reason, that market's got more difficult, more competitive, not because we've got more people doing what we do, but because landowners now want to take on more risk and think, how hard can this be? The answer is actually, it's very hard if you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of farmers are moving into the areas of trying to do integration. So you now imagine conversations with not us speaking to Network Rail and the operators, but now farmers doing that same role. And that's the sort of frustration that creeps into this system, which creates a sort of semi-chaotic position where things just get pushed down the road. We then get a very flexible planning permission, hopefully. That's become increasingly harder since post-COVID, but that's another story. And then ultimately we put in grey and green infrastructure. Green is anything basically that grows, and grey is hard. So that would include the schools and so on. Typically on a site of 1,000 acres, our actual development space, so area that would be used to sell to house builders, would be about 30%. The other 70% would be down to parklands and roads and community areas. So our developments, crucially, are centred around accessing metropolitan areas. We've actually centred much on the southern part of the country because London is a dominant, easier target. We've also got around the Birmingham conurbation as well, and the reason we do that is because we like the rail connections into those conurbations because people can access work and jobs. That's been slightly distorted by the COVID position, although the home working element has started to work its way back out of the system again. So there was a big, maybe a year ago, a big push for people moving out of London, for example. That seems to have now quietened down a bit. But as you can see, most of our developments are actually between Birmingham and London. So we like something within an hour of London where we crucially know houses will sell. And that's just, the figures are interesting to give you an idea of scale. So the business, as I say, has been going about 13 years. We've got about 35,000 plots consented. To put that in context, Barrett David Wilson, which is the biggest of the house builders by a long way, would probably have consented plots of 20,000 maybe, something like that. So it's a very big land bank. And within that constraint of building those 6 developments out, we would end up completing around 24 schools, and we would anticipate having about 10 million square feet of employment space. And crucially, within all of those developments, there's not one direct rail connection. And that's not for want of trying, it's for want of frustration. And I'll give you an example a bit later on of one where we're so close, but it's sort of near, but so far. So when we look at a site, we go through a checklist, and if you look, reading around from the bottom, location fundamentals, for us, what is the driver is our house is going to sell. Our house builder is going to buy our land. They are our customers. It seems a simple thing to say. Many people get it wrong. Land assembly, the complexities of dealing with landowners is really difficult to describe. You want to have as fewer landowners as possible. They all argue and everything else. So one landowner you're buying from is by far the and I'm sure when you're doing your projects, putting in rail-based elements, you've got to deal with CPOs and so on. Negotiating landowners must be right up there with your frustrations, I've got no doubt. Leaving infrastructure for just a second, on the right-hand side is the more soft, fluffy sort of stuff. You want to know that when you go into an area, you're going to engage with people, with local authorities. Can you get a dialogue going? Is this going to be hotly opposed? Because you are building 10 million square feet of new settlement. And initially, the reaction is it's never going to happen. People never really believe something's going to happen. And then once they get over that, you start to get people realizing you can actually supply what is good quality housing and environments and schools and so on. And you can judge that dialogue, and pushing uphill on these things is generally not worth it. And there are many, many developments which fail because the opposition is well funded and too great, and the logic is not there. You've got to have also confidence in the area, confidence that the thing can happen. Are the ingredients right? There are so many moving parts, and when you've got the sort of money out that you can have on land, delays can make the whole thing terminal. And crucially, you need flexibility both with the local authority you're dealing with. So if you're planning 6,000 or 7,000 units and 2 million square feet of employment space, you can be prescriptive about maybe 1,000 units, but as life changes, so modular construction, for example, which is potentially starting to change the way that we think about construction techniques, will change the way that things happen. It will change designs. So being too prescriptive in your designs early on means that you have to unpick them all as you go along, which is really, really time consuming. And lastly then, infrastructure. So We would honestly say that we would prefer to locate one of our developments with a strong connection to a rail-based node than a major highway. Because it is a bigger driver, people want to use the railways, and actually roads you can backfill, they're more flexible. But the frustration, of course, is that is a very difficult thing to do. So this is a very simple, in the property world, this is a very well-used typograph called an S-curve. But what it shows is a very depressing position for what we do as a business if you get it wrong. So the slide down is your expenditure. So just using that in some figures, on a 5,000 or 6,000 unit site, our expenditure, what we spend over a 20 to 25 year period might be 300, let's say 300 million. So say about 50,000 a plot. That's what we put in for Section 106 obligations, external infrastructure, and on-site infrastructure. Typically, what we call the point of maximum misery, which is the bottom of the curve there, where you've got your money out and you're just sort of hoping that the market's going to be there, is give or take about 20% of that expenditure. So about 60 million, and that doesn't include your land expenditure. If you start getting to 25, 30%, the rate at which you have to sell, the climb back out, which is this recovery point, if you like, becomes too steep. And one of the very sobering illustrations of that is the development of Canary Wharf, which I'm sure you are familiar with, Jubilee Line extension and so on. When you walk around that, you think, what an obvious place to build offices, it all feels great. 2 developers went bust in that process because they got their timings wrong and the recovery up wasn't fast enough. The demand wasn't sufficiently quick. And you've got to get your numbers just right for that recovery to make it work. And the horizontal line is the point of neutrality, i.e. you've got as much cash coming out as you've put in. That point typically could take you 6, 7, 8 years if you go reasonably quickly. So this is very long. I know it's not long-term in rail terms, actually you regard this as a heartbeat, but in development terms, this is very long-term speculative stuff which you need to get right. So now just turning this around and looking at it from a government perspective. So the government's agenda, more housing. Even through all of the travails they've got at the moment, housing is right up there. Gove is right on housing. This is one of the deluxe graphs or maps which shows where housing is underprovided. So anything that's basically shaded in a colour is underprovided. What's interesting about it is the majority of the country actually meets its housing needs, i.e. the needs set down the plan and the provision by the market meets. Most of the needs you can see is broadly around London and to the south of London. So that's where the imbalance, if you then go to the next slide. So the government's much heralded 300,000 units a year. You can see from this that there's still really, this doesn't actually include affordable housing, this is market, but you can see that they are well short of those targets. And you can see the downturn 2009, post-financial crash, which is when we started the business. Maybe bad timing, I don't know, but it was when we did. And you can see obviously the COVID downturn again there. If the government was able to accelerate rail delivery, it would massively enhance these figures. It's a simple fact, and I'm not saying that's easy to do, I'm just saying that is the fact, and I'll come to an example in a second. This was our first development. I'm going to use this as an illustration of frustrations in relation to railways. This is Alconbury. Some of you may know this, 1,500 acres. Give you an idea of the scale of that. The blue line around the top is about 18 miles. So it's a good distance round. And the red is Enterprise Zone. And then you've got, going through the middle of that, you've got the East Coast Main Line, tantalizingly close to your border. In fact, forming the eastern edge of your border. And in fact, it's the place where, I confess I know not much about railways, but what I do know is it goes from 4 tracks to 3 to 2, just as it passes the site. As it crosses the fens, it goes down. Even when they were building in Victorian times, they realised it was too expensive to build it with 4 lanes across a thing that flooded. It's a very easy place, potentially, to put in a turnaround, and there are logical arguments to actually why that would also improve passenger time and everything else. But the dialogues are very difficult to get. So if you go to the next slide, this is at the other end of the scale. This is the only plan that is consented for 9 million square feet. So just think of the two approaches. You've got the complexities of rail on the one hand, and on the other hand, you've got a plan for 9 million square feet consented by the local authority, convinced by us at the time that what we needed was flexibilities. You agree your key fixes, which are the red arrows, which are the access. You agree your blue circles, which is where the education goes. You agree broadly a zoning plan. In the light is residential, the slightly darker is commercial. And then number 3, if you can see it on the screen there, is reserved for commercial around a new rail station. So this is a plan granted in 2012. So by now, if you then go to the next, this was actually taken just as we were about to start work, so that the runway there is proper runway, same length as Stansted. The Americans used to fly everything that was big and ugly into that. And it was covered in, I learned very quickly that on the site, anything that was square was Second World War, and anything that was curved was Cold War. It was a simple way of knowing what the hangars were. And if you go to the next slide, that's broadly what it looks like now. And you can see that's 1,000 houses under construction or finished. 1 million square feet of commercial. Doesn't even look as though we've really touched the sides of it. That's at the opposite end from where the railway is. This is where we started in 2015, and then this is what that looks like now from the other side. So we've got a primary school here at the bottom and so on. So all that has gone on in parallel with the discussions regarding a rail connection, which have vacillated to and fro. And this slide is actually, this is a bit of a cheat. This is a bit old, this slide, but I couldn't find a better version of it. But what it did, I think it's actually 2019 or 20, but it was a survey that was done of price increases around stations with the highest increase in footfall. And what it basically showed was that the price increases around stations were disproportionate to the surrounding area. And I'm sure that is fundamentally obvious, but it's also, if you hold it in your heads, it's a driver for why, if you were to put these and integrate them into new developments, you would end up in a position where you could accelerate the developments. And our business is about acceleration. We need to sell land quickly to get back up that curve. And if we don't, we won't do any more. We only need one to go badly to lose a lot of ground. And therefore, rail-based integration is absolutely fundamental to our development. Right, so this is, I picked this as an example of somewhere where we have bought positions in anticipation of rail coming forward. So this is, I don't know what you now call this, whether you still call it the Oxcam Corridor or the Arc of Opportunity or whatever. It's the area between Oxford and Cambridge. So we bought a fried egg, 1,000 acres at the junction of HS2 and the East-West Rail, a place called Calvert, where there's a new depot going in. We also bought 2,500 acres at a place called Sandy, which is on the A1 and is actually smack in the middle of what is one of the routes for the central section of East-West Rail. We've also developed Alconbury, Wintering and Waterbeach are all ongoing developments. And in fact, Waterbeach, there is good news on the heavy rail side that the station is actually being moved within Waterbeach a bit further north to actually coincide with where the development is, our development and an adjoining development is going. So the Calvert development really has got caught in this super highway that was going to happen and then got abandoned and has quietly been pushed down the road. And Buckinghamshire has become a unitary authority, and so we've got sort of slightly Washington. That's not really an issue of rail, that's an issue of wider politics. But the Sandy development is a very interesting one because there we have 4,000 acres between us and an adjoining owner. Homes England and the government generally think it's a very good location for a new settlement. We could have maybe 25,000 units up there, which is a very meaningful position. And we'd actually, in talking to East West Rail, we don't particularly need the railway to happen now. What we need is certainty. We need someone to tell us, excuse me, that the line of the railway is going to go in a certain position. And there's still 9 options, and you can't plan for anything. And Central Beds, the local authority, are saying, we like the idea of it, but until the infrastructure is squared up, we can't do it. And in parallel with that, the A428, which is the road from Cambridge down to Black Cat Roundabout on the A1, that has been consented and that will come forward, so that piece of certainty is in. It's the rail that is lagging behind. And what you need on these developments is certainty. You can leave the corridors in. You don't need the railway to be in by 2028 or 29. You just need to know it's going to happen. And that's the attraction of very light rail against the frustrations of heavy rail. So this is a sample, a very simple sample of what we might spend. So at the bottom you've got your 350 million, and typically a Section 106 comprises of transport initiatives, education, and then sort of other, if you like. Education is the biggest element, and then highways. And then on top of that, we put in our own on-site 170 million, that's non-Section 106 stuff. So here you're about 50, 60,000 pounds a unit of what we are spending. The circled figure is our public transport contribution, 5 million. I mean, it doesn't touch the sides, but broadly that's all you can spend. I mean, you could spend 6 or 7 on buses, but there's a limit to what you can do. We would happily increase that figure materially if we got the connection into railways. And the reason we would happily do that is because we'd sell land faster, we get better pricing, and so on. So the whole thing has a circularity of logic about it, which is the frustration, really. And if VLR is able to come forward in that fashion, then the contributions that we could find, and I'm assuming other developers also would be able to find, could be very meaningful to making those connections work. And lastly, I just put this in to really just to show how the industry has changed. So this is a development that we did in a previous company. You might know it's the Westfield Shopping Centre at White City, next to the BBC. As part of that development, we had to bury the London Underground depot, put it underground and create 12 parking bays for trains at night. I don't know what you call it technically, but it's where the trains slept as far as I was concerned and were maintained. And it was £100 million of funding, and it actually wasn't a Section 106 obligation. It was an agreement with London Underground, who were the landowners at the time. And actually, if you ever get a chance to go around it, it is the most extraordinary piece of architectural infrastructure, to industrial architecture. It's wonderful. So that then, if you go on to the next slide, that then became the White City Shopping Centre. At that time, that shopping centre was worth well over £1 billion, and actually 100 million of costings for that was sort of a land cost contribution was manageable. Unfortunately, those days have gone. Shopping centres are no longer worth what they were, and it's difficult to think what else in the development industry now could fund to that extent what was then the case 20 years ago. And so we all know about the costs of inflation, everything else that's creeping into construction costs absolutely everywhere. Managing something like VLR, which is manageable, deliverable, and doesn't interrupt utilities in the way that's been described, for us is an enormously attractive possibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin Butler from Urban Civic. That was absolutely fascinating, and that's that missing piece of commercialism we often talk about. Could I invite all the speakers from the first session to come up to the stage? We're running a few minutes late, so what we're going to do is we'll keep this brief. We haven't got a microphone, so if you've got a question, stick your hand up. I'll point to you, stand up. If you could say who you are and where you're from, and then bellow out your question with confidence and directness, and we'll get it done. You, sir.
Yeah, so we're looking at a mix of operating conditions. So in the city centre, the idea is that we would create a public transport priority corridor. And I think one of the really interesting things is that for a bus-based measure, it's something our members would not have countenanced in any shape or form. I think because of the attractiveness and enthusiasm for doing something with VLR, they are looking at a much more radical option. I guess we're fortunate in Coventry that we've got a great ring road that actually will allow us, the flexibility. But we're certainly looking at some quite draconian, traffic management measures within the centre. Outside of the city centre, we're looking at, a whole combination of measures. We're looking at running with traffic, and then we're looking at how we manage the junctions. We're not going to go slavishly for a whole load of traffic signal control junctions because, as you probably know, they can introduce delay. We're looking at a much more flexible system of operating. So, it's a mixed answer really to your question. It's, we're looking at a range of conditions, and, I think the city centre trial will actually, give us the opportunity to evaluate how some of those work in practice. But I think the beauty for us of VLR is its ultimate flexibility, and I think the fact that it gives politicians, more confidence to take the bold decisions that we're going to need, if we're going to drive decarbonisation and improve the livability of our cities.
Brilliant. Thank you. Is that okay, yeah? Any more questions? Oh, can you... there. Okay, it's a question for Darren Smith, please, on supply chain. He mentioned that there is mainly a UK-based supply chain here. Given the experience that we have of logistical nightmares and price hikes due to the pandemic and other elements, this is good news. Could he indicate how companies can get specified in this project, please? Darren, how do people win business?
Okay, sure. The pre-series work that we're doing now, obviously the vehicle will go through an element of development, and what will probably happen is that once the production specification's finished, completed, concluded, we'll issue out RFQs as a normal standard process to the UK supply chain, as would a normal OEM. And there are vehicles such as the conference today and other events across the UK where our supply chain will be invited to come and talk to us.
Brilliant. And could we share some of those details to delegates at the end as well? That'd be brilliant. That'd be really useful.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's about many railways that are suited to your trains, trams, operate on meter gauge, Cape gauge and on broad gauge or different width. Narrow gauge is also very suitable to complex historic situations. Can your vehicles be adapted to different track gauges? Who can answer that one?
Shall I answer
Go
that
on then,
one?
Nick, please.
So the whole principle of very light rail is it's flexible. The reason that we're currently using the standard gauge is, firstly, Revolution was intended for the British branch line network, which is standard gauge. Secondly, the Coventry vehicle, we probably could have gone for a narrower gauge, but the interest from Transport for West Midlands in potentially using the vehicles in the future meant and they're a firm supporter of the project, meant that this particular vehicle was based on the standard gauge. But the gauge of the vehicle is completely flexible. The kits of parts that enable you to put the vehicles together, can cope with any gauge.
Okay, that's brilliant. There's a couple more questions that we will get answered after today's conference, and we'll share with some of the speakers today, just to keep in time. I had one really quick one for Robin. Robin, you mentioned that you had some problems with planning at the moment. Very quickly, if you could only change one or two things from planning, what would it be?
That's a very dangerous question, actually.
You can hear everyone in the room. Of this.
I think the fundamental problem in planning, well, there's two problems. And you asked what I would change. I think firstly the government just need to be clear about where they're going on the planning legislation, because they've been half pregnant and then rode back, if I'm mixing my metaphors, over the last 18 months. And secondly, resources are just woeful at the moment. Just officer time allocation and so on is just so frustrating that it's not so bad if you're on large schemes of the scales that we've got. We tend to get a bit better quality treatment because of the scale of our schemes, but the house builders making reserve matter applications, which should be straightforward, are just taking 6 to 7 months that should be 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah. Brilliant. Look, thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for our speakers today, please?